Good afternoon and welcome to Living Well radio program. You can find us here every Wednesday at 1 p.m. on KATB 89.3 in Anchorage or KJLP 88.9 on Palmer. You can also catch us online at katb.org. My name is Cammie and I'm here with my co-host Betty. How you doing today, Betty? Excellent. Great to have you back here again today. We are so excited to be in the studio with just a wonderful guest today. We know you guys are going to be so excited to hear the story, just in how she's going to share with us. We are here to welcome Renee Napier. Welcome to the studio, Renee.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you. You've come a long way. Where have you come from today?
I've come from Pensacola, Florida.
Yes.
Oh. Do you have snow in there?
We don't have snow in Florida.
I heard that we get to thank you for our snow.
Well, actually, I'm going to defer that to my sister Monique, who prayed for snow. We've been up here for a few days, and her grandsons and granddaughter have never seen snow. So she prayed for snow, and we got 10 inches.
Yes. Now, if you don't mind calling her and asking her to pray that we would have summer.
Okay,
we would
I'll do that.
appreciate that.
We have some other prayer requests, don't we?
Yes.
Yeah, she's got a direct line, it sounds like.
Yes, I have several, as a matter of fact.
Okay, all right. I'll let her know.
Listen, guys, we are here again with Renee Napier with a story of forgiveness, love, and redemption like none other I've heard before. So we want to give her as much time as possible today. Renee, would you mind just taking the first part of our program and just tell us as much as you can in a condensed time frame? And I know it keeps it short and makes that tough, but tell us just about your story.
Well, I am blessed to say that I've had 4 children. I have a son named Alan, a daughter named Michelle, and then I was also blessed with identical twin daughters, Megan and Carmen. And I raised my children basically the same way that I was raised in our church back home, which is First Baptist in Pensacola. And all 4 of my children came to know the Lord, which I'm very thankful for over the course of their lives. And let's see, after we'd been married for about 21 years, my husband and I divorced, and it was a divorce that I didn't want, so I experienced hatred for the very first time in my life, and I hated myself for hating him, and had to pray for that to be taken care of, for God to take that feeling away from me. And then after the hatred went away, I experienced bitterness and anger, and even though I thought in my heart I'd forgiven him, I carried that bitterness and anger with me through the next couple of years and thought that I had it in check until a friend of mine told me that I was very bitter one night. And I argued with him and then went home and thought about it and realized he was correct. So I have decided that I was going to put my ex-husband behind me and go forward from that moment and start over and try to live my life fuller without bitterness and anger. And I enrolled in college, and then on May 11th, 2002, my sister-in-law came to the door that morning to deliver this news to me. This is what she said. There's been an accident. It was Megan. She didn't make it. And as you can imagine, my whole world just crashed at that moment, and I have never experienced a moment of such devastation in my entire life. And I screamed out no, and I experienced wailing for the very first time. I had read about that and heard about it in my Bible my whole life and never experienced it from my own soul, and it came from very deep down inside of me. And after I screamed out no 3 times and kept searching her face for a different response, she just stood there. I asked her if she was kidding, and she just stood there and looked at me. And I realized that she was why would she kid me about something so serious? And I realized that her answer was not going to ever change. So she had experienced that bitterness. It watched me over the course of the last 3 years, and she asked me if I wanted her to go tell my ex-husband Philip. And I told her no, that was our daughter, that I wanted to be the one to do it. And so we ended up showing up at his door, 3 policemen, my sister-in-law and myself, and he opened the door, and his response to seeing this entourage of people at his front door that morning was, which one was it? And I explained to him that it was Megan and that her friend Lisa had also died, that they had been in a car crash. And he asked the same question that I had asked, if there was alcohol involved, if it was a drunk driver. And I told him that they knew that there was alcohol, but they would have to do this blood test, had to be sent away. But I didn't know very much. And at that moment, we thought the guy was 27 years old. That's what I had been told. And so that afternoon, that day, we had to get all of our children home, our other children, because my daughter, Michelle, lived in Tallahassee, and she and her husband were looking for a place to live in Gainesville. She was getting ready to go to law school there. So she had traveled down to Gainesville to look for a townhouse to live in. And then my son, Alan, lived in Little Rock, Arkansas. And my daughter, Carmen, Megan's twin, was in North Carolina with a friend of hers. She had gone up there for a graduation of one of her friend's cousins was graduating. And so that was our quest for that afternoon, was to get them home. And of course, they had to be told. Mm-hmm. So we got the message to each of them, and my dad worked on getting them home so that we could plan a funeral and try to figure out something to do about how we were going to survive. And that afternoon, Philip, my ex-husband, came to me and he said, my dad and I are going to meet your dad in Pensacola, and we're going to go to the funeral home. And I told him I wanted to go with him. So I did, and we went, and basically I was still in shock and not really able to have a coherent thought much. The only thing that kept going through my head was, Megan is dead. What am I going to do? How am I going to live? How am I going to survive? I don't even know how to breathe anymore and what my life is going to be like. And so we went to the funeral home, and we picked out a coffin and did whatever planning they needed us to do. Went back by the police station on the way home. Now, I was riding in the car with my ex-husband, Philip, and his father. And after we picked up Megan's purse at the police station, we drove around the corner to a gas station so his dad could get a Diet Coke. He got out of the car, and Philip and I were alone in the car. And I just had this thought going through my head about Philip and me and what we're facing at this point in our lives. And I just felt very compelled to say to him, Philip, I don't know if this is the appropriate time or not, but I just want to let you know that I forgive you for everything. And he put his hand on my leg, on my knee, and he said, Renee, thank you so much. That means a lot to me. And you would think that the one who was freed the most would have been him at that moment, but it was actually me. And so for the very first time in my life, I truly experienced what forgiveness does for you and how it frees you. You're the one who really and truly are bound by chains and shackles, and you're just stuck in a place where you can't move forward. And God lifted that burden off of me immediately. I felt lighter, and I felt so much better just being able to say to him, I forgive you. And there was so much healing for me at that moment, and I know for him as well. And we without even really saying anything about it, we just somehow came to the decision that we were all going to let our friends and family come to Philip's house so that they didn't have to go to two different homes to love on us that weekend. And that worked out really well. And I just remember that night standing there in that house of his that was full of people. Our children had finally come in, and there was a lot of noise going on in the room. And I looked over and I saw Philip sitting in his chair, and we just had this moment there. I had gotten my revenge on him during our divorce time. I'd sold a fish that he had caught, a big 13.5-foot blue marlin that was his prized possession. And I saw him sitting there, and I walked over and I said, while I'm at it, I just want to apologize for selling your fish. And he laughed, and he said, that's okay. I thought about having a plaque made for it that said, caught by Philip Napier, released by ex-wife Renee. And so we had a really good laugh. And our son, Alan, saw us laughing and interacting. And my dad had told me throughout my divorce that my children would be okay when they saw that I was okay. And his words rang true at that moment, because my son came over and he said, Dad, get up. We need to have a group hug. So I know that healing was beginning for everyone at that moment. And then we just had to progress through the next months of preparing for a trial. And we'd never done that before. And grief is weird and messy, and it's hard to navigate because my children were older. And I think even if they were younger and still lived at home with me, it would have been a problem because everybody grieves differently. And we all have to go through our stages of anger. And I went through rage when I knew that we were having a trial because Eric pled not guilty, and I knew that he was so guilty. And I found out that he was really 24 years old when I read the police report. And he's my son's age. They were born in the same year. And so I kept thinking about things that helped me keep him human. And I would think about the fact that he and my son are the same age. If that had been my son would have been distraught. He would have been torn up on the inside, and he wouldn't have been able to live with himself until he could get in front of the families and apologize. And I knew that the legal system was probably keeping Eric away from us, but we desperately needed to hear him say to us, "I'm sorry for what I did." And his mother wrote a card, but I needed him to do it. I needed to hear from him, but he was being told not to. And he blamed another car for cutting him off. And then down the road, 17 months later, in July of 2003, we had this trial that was a week long. And at the end of that week, the jury found him guilty of 2 counts of DUI manslaughter. And then in October, a few months later, the judge sentenced him to 22 years in prison. So his sentence went like this. He got 11 years for Megan, 11 years for Lisa, 8 years probation, and his driver's license was revoked permanently. So I remember that day pretty well. I think about it all the time, and when I go and share this story, I talk about that day. And I remember listening to the judge explaining the sentences and how he arrived at the 11 years for each girl. And then he said he had the discretion to run the sentences consecutively, which means he would run them back to back for 22 years, or concurrently, meaning he would serve them both at the same time and get out after 11 years. And the judge chose consecutive sentences for 22 years. And my thought was that justice has been served, because 22 years sounded like justice. It sounded that it would be a just and fair sentence. And what we wanted by a just and fair sentence was for him to go long enough that when he got out, he was not a repeat offender. But we didn't want him to be incarcerated for so many years that he became a criminal-minded person, because he was not a criminal-minded person going in. He came from a very good family. He was raised the same way I raised my children. He was taught right from wrong. He had good morals and values, and he knew better. And so many people know better, and they just make that choice because they get conditioned to doing that. You know, they start drinking, and then they attempt it one time, and then they get away with it, so they do it again, and then they become very confident and comfortable in that choice. And I'm not condoning it by any means, but I know that that's our society. And so I knew that he didn't mean to kill anybody. That wasn't his plan. So we felt like 22 years. He was facing 30 years, 15 years for each girl. And basically he got a 30-year sentence because of that 8 years of probation. So we felt pretty good about that. And in that courtroom that day, there were 2 good things that happened. I was able to look at Eric in his eyes. He was just sitting a few feet away from me, and I was able to say to him, "Eric, I forgive you." That's when when the family gets to speak, and I got to have what they call it, a victim impact statement, and I got to speak and tell him everything that we had lost, everything that I had gone through that year, cleaning out Megan's apartment and having family dinners without her, and her birthday and Christmas and Thanksgiving, and how difficult that was for us. And basically just told him everything that we had lost. But I also wanted him to know, and I wanted to speak it to him. I wanted him to know that I had forgiven him. And I know that he was not expecting that. And I could kind of look in his eyes and tell that it was, kind of a shock to him. It wasn't like a huge, the look on his face was not like, total shock, but I could tell that it was not what he was expecting to hear. And then after we all got to speak, he got to stand and say something, which he had chosen not to do in the trial. And now he decided that he was going to apologize to us, which was huge. There was a lot of emotion, a lot of tears, and I was just sobbing. My sister was sitting there with me, my daughter Carmen. We were all just in tears. And I just believe we really needed to hear that from him. So he went off to prison, thought about his mom. I'm a mother of a son, and I couldn't even imagine what she was going through, that it had to be so scary for her to think about her son going off to prison for 22 years, a dark place. And I thought about him, and I had compassion on him. And I think it's tragic that there's no better place to put him for him to have his consequences, his punishment. It's very tragic, but I just thought that would make everything feel better in my heart, but it didn't. After I thought about all of that, and we have justice being served, so why am I not 100% happy? And I realized nobody won. You can't win. There are no winners. And I tell people all the time, the only way for us to win is if Megan and Lisa can come back. Mm-hmm. And you think about that, it doesn't matter how long he goes to prison, those two girls are never coming back to this earth. And then for his family, the only way for them to win is if he hadn't killed anybody. But if he didn't have to go to prison for 22 years, because that's like another life that's been lost. So he went off to prison. I started doing presentations, DUI presentations, in March of 2004, and I still am doing them. And my mom asked me, once he went off to prison, she found out about a calling list that inmates have where they can get people approved so that they can call these people. And she asked me if she could get on it. And I was going to also get on the calling list. And I thought, you know what? No, I'm going to let my mom reach out to him because I know that's something that she wants to do. And I don't want to rob her of that. And so she did. She got on his calling list. And he started calling her regularly. And I would hear about those conversations. He would write letters to us and cards at Thanksgiving, Christmas, and especially Mother's Day, because this happened. The crash happened on Mother's Day weekend. It was the day before Mother's Day. And so I would correspond with him through letters. And these conversations that he would have with my mom, I would hear what they would talk about. So in about 2005, I was at her house. He'd been in prison for about a year and a half. And he called, and my mom put me on the phone. He must have asked about me immediately, just, how's Renee doing? And she said, well, she's right here. I'll put her, and she put me on the phone. And the very first thing he said is, Ms. Napier, I just want to let you know that I take full responsibility for what I did that night. And if I had not been drinking, Megan and Lisa would still be alive. Well, that was huge for me because I really desperately needed to hear him say that as well. Not just I'm sorry, but I also take responsibility. He's not blaming anybody anymore. He's owning up to his actions. And I encouraged him to write letters to everyone and tell them what he had said to me. So he did. He wrote to the Dixons. He wrote to my children, my ex-husband, and I believe my mom and dad and my sister and my brother, and told them that he took responsibility. Well, when my daughter Michelle got her letter, she called me, and she said, Mom, is it a burden on you that he's going to be in prison for 22 years? And I said, it really is. And I remembered that sentencing, and I remembered what the judge said, and I had an idea. So I discussed it with his mom and dad. I had moved down to the St. Pete area at that time, and so I passed through Tallahassee getting to Pensacola a lot, and they lived in Tallahassee, so I called them and said, I have something I want to talk to you about. And they were going to Gary Smallridge's mother was turning 92, and they were going to her birthday party. They were giving her a birthday party, and Gary is Eric's dad. And he said, we're going to Bonefish Grill. Why don't you join us for dinner? And I did. And it was a little awkward at first, but we hugged. And then I told him what I was thinking. I said, I know you appealed a sentence. They went to the Florida Appellate Court. They went to the Florida Supreme Court. And I knew that they were on the way to the United States Supreme Court to appeal his sentence because it was so long. And I said, my dad told me that that's a very expensive process. And I said, and I have an idea. Don't know how to do this, but I'm willing to figure it out. And I said, I've thought about this, and I thought that what if we try to get Eric's sentences changed, to get the judge to restructure them to concurrent so he could get out after 11 years. And they were blown away. And I mean, they came to my car and they said, Renee, I don't even know, you've offered so much towards Eric, the forgiveness of your family, and now this. His mom said, I don't know if I could do it if I was in your shoes, if the situation was reversed. And I just told her, I said, I know you could. You've got it in you. God gives it to all of us. And so that was our next quest. And we actually made that happen in August. I think it was either the 16th or the 18th of 2006, August 16th, 2006. And we went back to the same courtroom, and we asked the judge to restructure Eric's sentences, and He did. He granted that for Eric. So that day was absolutely huge. The courtroom was different. We were intermingled, and we had gotten to meet him ahead of time, and that was very healing, and got to meet him through the glass. And when my daughters and I, my son wasn't quite ready to meet him yet, and we met him that morning before the hearing that afternoon. And so we're talking to him on phones through the glass, and I heard him say something. I heard my daughter say something, and I wondered what he had said to her. And kind of knew, but he said it to me, and this is what he said. He said, I want you to know that it is because of Megan and Lisa that I have my eternal salvation. And that just blew me away. My daughter, Michelle, her response was, Megan and Lisa were the kind of girls that would have died for your eternal salvation. And I just began to cry. I was so proud of my daughters at that moment, and my family, and what we were doing, and experiencing God at work in all of us, not just in me. I can't, a lot of people give me all the credit for what's happened, and honestly, all the credit goes to God and to my family for being obedient. And all of us, we were just obedient in what God has commanded us to do. And so time went on. I wanted to add Eric into my presentations. He got moved to a different facility where he wasn't a maximum security inmate anymore, because the sentence was shortened now. And I just went to the prison and asked if they would allow him to join me. And so in 2010, we started doing my DUI presentations together. I had him on video already because they'd gotten permission to go in and videotape him in prison. But having him there, standing there in chains and shackles and handcuffs, was so powerful. And for the DUI message especially, but I always talk about forgiveness too, because it's a story of forgiveness. And we will have kids come up and say, I promise that I'm not going to drink and drive or let my friends drink and drive, and I promise I won't be a passenger in the car with someone who is. And then they say, but you know what, I really want to talk to you about that forgiveness. I want you to tell me about that. So the next 2 years, we went into 40 of 67 counties in the state of Florida. Kept him very busy. I told him that I wouldn't drag him all over the state of Florida at his expense, and that's exactly what I did. He lost weight every time, like 10 pounds, and but he wanted to do it. And I watched God at work in him, and God at work in me and in my family. And the two of us have become very close. I've grown to love him. I know my family loves him and cares about him, and he's been released. He got out November 26, 2012, and he's doing well. He's working at Goodwill in Tallahassee. He went back to school at FSU. He already had a degree before he went into prison. He's getting his second degree in real estate, and he'll graduate this semester in May. And and I'm keeping him busy. So we still go together and speak. So that's...
Wow. That is some story. That's remarkable.
Renee, we let women know that you're going to be here today, and so we have asked other women some questions that they would want to ask you. And one of the most frequent questions that we received in different variations of this was probably one that you've had many times, but was forgiveness, can you relate it back to a pivotal point, or was it more of a process? Like, was there a struggle kind of going back and forth whether or not you really were believing what you were feeling? Tell us a little bit about that.
That's a very good question. I remember when I found out that this was a drunk driver that killed my daughter, I remember thinking, I have to forgive this guy for what he's done. And I believe in my heart, somewhere early on, I talked to God about that and said that I would forgive him. But then as time moved forward, I had to struggle with the fact that he pled not guilty, and I had to struggle with all of these emotions. And I felt, for the very first time in my life, I had so much rage inside of me. I'd never experienced that before, and I didn't know what to do with that. And I told my sister one time when I was with her, I said, I just need something, an old car and a sledgehammer. And I just need to bang on that thing and release this rage that I had. I don't know what to do with it, and I need to get rid of it, and I don't know how to do it. I never hated Eric, but I did have to pray a lot, and I did have to process through how I was going to actually forgive him because a lot of times I think when we know we have to make a choice, which is exactly what it is, it's a choice you make. I know that I didn't know how society was going to feel, but even bigger than that to me was how my family would feel. Mm-hmm. Because I struggled with so many things. Am I betraying these two girls when I tell him I forgive them? But then I would always go back to, but these two girls were believers. They're in heaven. And they know that that is the right thing to do. And growing up in a Baptist church, I was a GA, and I memorized so much scripture growing up. And I had that one down, Matthew 6:14 and 15. If you forgive man when he sins against you, your heavenly Father will forgive you your sins. But if you don't forgive man when he sins against you, your heavenly Father will not forgive you of your sins. And I'm not going to ever try to pull off that I'm not a sinner, because for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. I am in that all. And I know that I'm a sinner, and I struggled with all of that. Okay, God, I know I have to forgive him if I want to be forgiven. But how am I supposed to do this? How do I do it? Do I say it out loud to the world? Do I just say it to you? Do I say it to him? And then God just provided that avenue for me once I had decided in my heart that I was going to forgive him. And I can't even remember if I told my kids. I don't know if they heard that day for the first time or if we had talked about it before then. But I just thought, this is my moment. I can actually talk this to him. I can say it to him, and he's sitting right there in the room. And I just said, Eric, I forgive you. And honestly, God started doing a work in me. And some people say, well, did you really fully mean it? Mm-hmm. And this would be my response back. It doesn't really matter, because those words are just like, I love you. I forgive you. There's so much power in just saying those words that God can do the rest, if that makes sense. So
it makes perfect sense. Thank you for sharing that.
Another question that came through, Renee, was how did you keep from being bitter?
Well, that is a very good question, because I told you that I experienced so much bitterness through my divorce. And I really didn't even know. But listen to this. Our daughter got married in 2001, and I'd gotten divorced in 1999. Our daughter got married in 2001, our daughter Michelle. And I wouldn't even, my ex-husband had gotten remarried, and I wouldn't even sit by them in the wedding. I said, no, I'm not going to sit on the same row. So, but yet I'm not bitter. So, I had bitterness all over me. So I didn't want to live my life being bitter. And I'd already experienced what that does to you, and how that robs you of so much life, to live just hating someone or being angry about the situation. It doesn't change it. And I realized for those 3 years of walking through that, on that path, I realized that being bitter only repels people. People don't want to hang out with you. They don't want to talk to you. They don't want to ask you a question. And they might get to where they see you coming and they turn the other way. And I didn't want that to be who I am. And I also really had thought long and hard about the fact that I don't want my grandchildren to be born into this world hating someone and being bitter about someone they'd never even met. And so I decided that I was not going to let that bitterness overtake me again. And it really and truly, it is a choice. And I have this one expression that I use a lot. It's not an original. I don't know where it came from, but it sums up everything to me so well. If you hold a grudge, if you can't forgive someone, it's like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. Yeah. And I tell people that poison is hatred, bitterness, anger, and those three emotions can destroy you, the person that you are, if you allow them to. And so you have to make that choice that you're not going to let them, and you're going to forgive someone, whether they deserve it or not, because a lot of times they don't, whether they tell you they're sorry or not. And you just have to decide that you're going to do it, and God does the rest. He just helps you get free of that.
I'm going to ask you something that maybe you already answered it, but I have seen this in a lot of the questions that we have received. When you decided to forgive Eric, do you feel like it was a process that took time? Do you feel like there were steps you had to take? Did you have to keep going back to it daily? Or do you feel like that the moment you said, Eric, I forgive you, that it was done?
Well, that question is going to be a twofold answer, because yes, it was a process. But leading up to that moment where I was able to look at him and say to him, I forgive you, I probably said it to myself, said it out loud in my house, said it to God, wrote it in my notes, and probably did take it back a few times. But once the words came out of my mouth and I said it to him on that day, and that was about 17 months down the road, I truly meant it, and there was no turning back, and I've never regretted it. So yeah, I do believe that it was a process of a lot of prayer and a lot of, maybe I even argued with God and said, I know that this is what you expect, but how do I do this? Because my daughter died. This is different from anything else. But if you think about it, I mean, and I know I had to go through this process because I have all these answers to it. So I was seeking God, and I said to people, I know that, I forgot my train of thought just left me, but speaking to God and saying, how am I going to do this? If I forgive him, I'm betraying Megan and Lisa. I would argue that through, but I just realized that obviously if I want to be forgiven, I have to forgive. And I felt like God gives us the command, that it is a command, not an option. He doesn't say forgive for this, 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 and this, but don't forgive for this, 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 and this. It's forgiveness, and it's not just 7 times, it's 70 times 7, and the fact that I thought about him dying on a cross and forgiving people who were, as they were doing it, as they're hammering nails into him, he's forgiving them, asking God to forgive them because they don't know what they're doing. And all of those things kept going through my head. So I know that it was a process. But I believe that once I was able to look at him and say to him, I forgive you, that God took care of the rest, and that I never regretted it.
That was going to be my next question. Have there ever been doubts that you did the right thing? Or I know sometimes when people are experiencing bitterness, it feels good to wallow in that sometimes.
That's a good point.
Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. And that is, I believe that's kind of a sickness, but I think that we're all wired that way. And the longer you wallow in it, the more comfortable you become being that person that, I don't even want to say a martyr, because you don't realize, I don't know that you realize that that's what you're becoming, but that becomes your comfort zone. And you do wallow in it, and if you allow yourself to. And I decided I'm not going to wallow in this any longer. I need to step up. And for me, it may have taken me longer than some people to do it, and it may not have taken me as long. I don't know, but I remember there was a story on the news. This was before Megan had passed away. And there was a story on the news, and I kept hearing about this father who lost his 2 daughters to a drunk driver. They were on their way to church one Wednesday afternoon. He plowed through a stop sign and killed both of this man's daughters. And I remember watching the news and hearing him talk to the judge and say, and this was early on, that he had forgiven this guy and that he didn't want him to go to prison. And I remember thinking, I know this man is a man of faith because he confesses that he admits I'm a man of faith. And I thought, how do you do that? I mean, I understand that God tells us to forgive, but I don't know that I have that in me to do that immediately. And so I wrestled with that. And then I wrestled with, if I forgive him, does Eric still have punishment? And God just showed me, you forgive, it doesn't right the wrong, it doesn't erase it, and it doesn't mean that he shouldn't be punished. Because I felt like he needed punishment. And so God just he helped me through that whole process, but I've never regretted it. It definitely was the right thing to do, and it has freed me.
Well, our time is almost up, and I hate to bring it to an end, but I do want to tell our listeners that you did not have a chance to tell your whole story here, but you are going to be speaking other times while you're in Anchorage. Wednesday night, April the 30th at... March the 30th. I got ahead of myself. You're going to be at the Anchorage Baptist Temple, speaking at 7 o'clock. And then April the 1st, April Fool's Day, on Friday night, from 6:30 to 8:30, you'll be speaking at the Refresher, which is going to be held at Change Point. So I encourage everyone listening, if you want to hear the rest of the story, to come out. And people are going to be asking, is Eric with you?
Eric is not with me this time, but that doesn't mean that he can't come back, or he can't come with me the next time. So that would definitely add so much dimension to this story for people to hear directly from him.
Well, Renee, thank you so much for
Thank
sharing the
you.
story. Wow. I know I sit here and marvel that you were able to do this. I mean, what you went through was something no parent ever wants to go through. But the fact that you were able to forgive him is an amazing testimony to your faith and to what God can do if we just
Absolutely.
allow him to,
Yes.
because it is all God.
It is all God.
Within ourselves, we can't do any of
No.
it. And
No.
so thank you very much. And again, I want to remind our listeners that you're going to be at Anchorage Baptist Temple Wednesday night, March the 30th at 7 o'clock, and then at the Refresher at Change Point, April the 1st at 6:30.
Yes.
Yay.
Thank you so much,
You're
Renee.
welcome.
And I look forward to attending those events as well to hear more of your story.
Thank you so much for
much.
having me. This is wonderful.
By the way, I want to tell our listeners that next week it's going to be just Cammie and I live on the air at 1 o'clock. So if you want to laugh and have a good time, just turn on your radio at 1 o'clock next week and listen
Hey,
to us.
Betty, while we're here, let me just tell you we are 7 minutes over time, so I'm going to let you answer to Tom about that, okay?
No problem.
I'm sorry, it's my fault. I know whose fault
You'll
it
be
is.
gone by the time he knows,
That's right.
All right. Thank you, Renee.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. You can join us every Wednesday right here on Living Well at KATB 89.3 here in Anchorage at 1 p.m., as well as KJLP 88.9 on Palmer. You can also catch us online at KATB.